Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to take a very quick look at the great Heartland Hauling Company. This game is for 2 to 4 players, ages 13 and up, and the average play time is between 30 and 45 minutes. In this game, players are going to be hauling cargo back and forth from location to location in an attempt to be the first to reach their cash goal. Let's just take a quick moment to look at the components and see how the game is played. As far as the components are concerned, we'll start with these cards over here on the left. Basically, you've got two different types, and they are shuffled together at the beginning of the game to form the draw deck. The first type of card is a fuel card, and they're either numbered 1, 2, or 3. The other type of card is a freight bill card. As you can see, there are 4 different colors here, and that is representative of the 4 different good types in the game. Now you're probably noticing at this point the absence of an actual playing board, and that's where these cards come into play. Along the top here, you've got a number of these location cards, and they'll be dealt in a specific way at the beginning of the game in order to form the playing board. Now they are double-sided, and for the most part, both sides are the same, with the exception of little symbols like this that are used during the advanced game. There are certain advanced rules that can take effect if you want them to, in order to give your play experience a little bit more flavor. But just to sum this location card up, you've got your native good listed along the top, and you've got the goods that can be sold along the bottom for cash. Now, as far as this other card goes, this is the distribution center card. As I mentioned, these location cards will be laid out in a particular way to form the actual board. This distribution center card will be placed in the center. Now, each player in the game will have their own color, and as such, they'll be able to pick a truck of one particular color to represent themselves during the game, and to go along with that, they'll also get these scorecards. In this particular example, you've got a blue scorecard which matches this blue truck, and there are actually 2 different parts to this scorecard. The very top part of the scorecard lists just your truck here, and these are the spaces that can be filled up in your truck in order to carry these goods around. The bottom half of the first card and the rest of the second card is basically your score track. You'll be moving the score cubes, or just one of them, along your track just to show and keep track of how much cash you have in the game. The first person to reach their goal will win the game, and the goal will depend on how many people are actually playing. Now, the last thing I want to briefly touch on are these truck stop cards. And as a result of the game reaching its Kickstarter goal and furthering that by meeting some of its stretch goals, these truck stop cards were included with the game. And basically, these are upgrades that will be dealt around the location cards at the beginning of the game. Players can land on them in order to purchase upgrades. However, players are only allowed to have one upgrade for the entire game. Just to name off an example here, this GPS allows the player who owns it to move diagonally. In another case, this smartphone allows a player to have a hand limit of 6 instead of 5. It's worth noting that playing with these cards are completely optional. Game setup is pretty simple. The way you actually set up these location cards will differ depending on how many people are playing the game. In this particular example, you're going to be discarding one of each type of location card, and then you're going to be laying out the rest after shuffling them. You're going to be laying them out randomly in a 3x3 grid like so. After doing that, you're going to be placing 5 cubes on that location's native good. In this case, you've got corn, so 5 corn good cubes are put here. The 2-player trucks, in this case a 2-player game, the 2-player trucks are placed in the center on the distribution center card. Each player gets a scorecard. Again, one of them will have the truck on it, and one of them will be the rest of the scorecard from the first card. Also, you'll get a score cube, and you'll be putting that on the number 5, or you'll be giving yourself 5 cash at the beginning of the game. Finally, the deck of cards is shuffled. 3 are laid out to form the distribution pool of sorts. Think Ticket to Ride, and that players can make use of this pool in addition to the deck during the game, and each player will start with a hand of 5 cards. Now I went ahead and moved things around a bit just so that I could sort of illustrate the parts of a player's turn. Speaking of which, a player's turn is broken up into, well, 3 phases for lack of a better term. The first phase on a player's turn is the move phase. The second phase is the take one action phase. And finally, the third phase is the refuel phase. The move phase is pretty simple. All that entails is a player moving their truck from location card to location card. And they'll be doing that in one of 2 ways. They can either spend cash at a ratio of 1 to 1, and to spend cash they'll be simply moving their score cube backward along their track. Or, instead of spending cash to move, they can discard these fuel cards. Now it's worth noting that a player cannot move more than 3 spaces, meaning that a player cannot spend more than 3 cash, and they cannot discard these fuel cards that have a value greater than 3. The second phase of a player's turn is the action phase. Here, a player will be able to take one of 3 actions. They can either load goods onto their truck, unload goods from their truck onto a location, or they can spend cash to discard any number of cards from their hand. Picking up goods from a location or loading them onto your truck simply involves you discarding a set number of these freight bill cards. The number that you have to discard, however, depends on the type of good you're picking up. If you're picking up the location's native good, in this case the pink cubes match this pink symbol here, so that is the native good. And to pick these up, you'll just simply have to discard these freight bill cards at a ratio of 1 to 1. So the blue player could discard 2 of these cards to pick up 2 of these cubes and put them into their truck. However, if the player wanted to go after the corn, now that is a different story because that is not the native good. In order to pick that up, you'll have to discard at a ratio of 2 to 1. Or in this case, you'll have to discard 2 of these cards to pick up 1 of those cubes. Unloading goods is pretty much done the same way. A player will be discarding these freight bill cards to move goods from their truck onto that location. However, the location must demand that good. So in this case, the blue player has these black cubes on their truck, and as a result, this location must have a black symbol on it showing that they demand it. In this case, it does. The symbol here, I know it's kind of hard to read, but it's the black cattle symbol, and right next to it is the number 4. So in this case, the player could discard one of these cards, and the ratio is 1 to 1, to unload one of these black cubes from their truck onto this location. As a result, since there is a number 4 next to that symbol, the player's cube would move up 4 along the money track here on their scorecard. Now, just as a side note, a location cannot have more than 8 cubes, so that is something that you'll have to observe as you're playing the game. The third action during Phase 2 simply involves you being able to pay 1 cash to discard as many cards as you want from your hand. The third and final phase, or the refuel phase, simply involves the player drawing back up to 5 cards, and the player can either do that by drawing from the deck and or by drawing from the resource pool. Anytime you draw from the resource pool, you'll need to refresh it immediately. Once a player has 5 cards, that'll end their turn, and the next player will go. And this will continue until one player manages to reach their goal. And again, the goal will depend on how many people are playing the game. Now, when one player does reach the goal, the other players will have one final turn to try and tie things up or even surpass the player that reached their goal. And the player with the most amount of cash at the end of the game wins. Now, just one final thing to touch on. I forgot to cover this during that last bit, but whenever a player has cargo on their truck at the end of the game, you'll actually have to factor that into your final score. And to do that, you'll take a look at the distribution center card, and it lists some negative values here, and you just simply add them up. In this case, you've got corn and a pig. So that's -1, -2. In this case, the player here would adjust their final score by -3. And that would be their final score. And again, the person with the most cash at the end of the game wins. And there you have it. That's just a very quick look at the game, The Great Heartland Hauling Company. I didn't cover all of the rules found in the manual, but this should give you a general idea as far as how the game is played. You can check out my review at www.dadsgamingaddiction.com, or you can simply click on the link in the below description. That'll take you there as well. This is Vince, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.